Bright Tuty. Every student matters.
Hello, dear students. Welcome to another lecture. Now, in this lecture, I'm going to teach you the ways and the most appropriate method of attempting Section A and to ensure that you score full marks in your Section A. When it comes to Nagaland board, the questions that you are expected to get in your paper might carry different types of questions following them. The passages will have different typology of questions. They can be multiple choice questions. There can be questions where you simply have to state whether they are true or false. Then there can be, questions which will test your vocabulary, tell you to find the words which mean the same as something or the opposite to something. Then there can be simple questions wherein you'll have to answer, on the basis of what you have read in the passage. So the type of questions may vary, but there is one, core thing that you need to keep in mind when attempting your section A, that is to read it properly. The reason why section A is known as section A reading and these passages are known as comprehension passages is because you are expected to comprehend them. You are expected to read them and understand them. There might be a lot of words that you may come across, the meanings of which would be unknown to you. Obviously, we do not have the possibility of carrying a dictionary with us, right? But in that case, and a piece of advice that you always need to adhere to is to refer to their contextual meaning. Whatever difficult words you come across in the passage will be used in context. So, when you read the line in which those difficult words are used, that will give you a slight idea as to what and in what sense those words have been used. And that would be enough for you to answer the questions based on it. Also, please remember, whenever you get those questions in which you are supposed to answer the questions on the basis of your reading of the passage, never copy anything from the text. Copying something from the text, writing it as it is something that does not leave a very good impression onto your examiners, because comprehension passages are to be understood first and answered later on. So if you answer them without having understood them, then the entire purpose is going to go in vain. So, dear students, I shall take up 3 comprehension passages in my video. The purpose behind the same is to make you all understand how can the different type of questions come up in your papers and what is the way of answering them in the most appropriate manner. All right. So, without much ado, let us begin with our first passage. Now, this passage, now as the name, or as I can say the first word in the passage itself tells us, this is about April Fool's Day. So the passage says, April Fool's Day, sometimes called All Fool's Day, falls on the first of April every year. People play practical jokes on each other on this day. If you have been fooled on April Fool's Day, you may wonder how this tradition started. Well, you're not alone. No one knows for sure how April Fool's Day began, but the most likely explanation has to do with the calendar. People used to celebrate New Year's Day on April 1st. So you see, on reading the very first paragraph of this passage, we've got the hint that this passage deals with the April Fool's Day. So the writer tells us that April Fool's Day is sometimes called the All Fool's Day, and it falls on the first April of every year. Now, people they play practical jokes on each other. Now, what do we mean by practical jokes? Practical jokes means those jokes which are related to the routine life of the people, which are related to those things which our people do on a daily basis. So people usually play very general day-to-day, core jokes with each other. Now, if you've been fooled on the April Fool's Day, you may wonder, you must be thinking, how did this day start? So the writer tells us that you are not the only one who has this question in mind, because there are a lot of people who've been thinking about it and nobody knows exactly how did April Fool's Day begun. But the most likely explanation behind the same is with respect to the calendar. Now, there was a time when people would celebrate New Year's on the 1st of April. Okay. In the 1500s, the calendar changed and so did the date of the new year. So 1500, what happened? The calendar also changed, and because of the change in the calendar, the New Year's date also changed. But some people resisted it. They disagreed to to follow the same. They did not accept it, and they continued to celebrate the New Year on 1st April. These people were called the April Fools. Who? Those who continued to celebrate New Year's on the 1st of April were those who were called April Fools. People following the new calendar played tricks on the April Fools. So those people who who would not follow the new calendar, they were played tricks on and they were called the April Fools, as I told you. Now in France, April Fools were referred to as Poisson d'Avril, which means April fish. Now, why were the people in France known as April fish? This was because people thought fish were easy to catch using a bait on a hook. So people believed that if they are going to go for fishing with a bait on the hook. Now, what is a bait? Bait is something that is used by the people to trap somebody or something. So here the people believe that if they are going to attach some bait onto the end of their hook, it will be easier for them to catch a fish. And such people who believed in this ideology were called as April fish. And the children would tag a paper fish on person's back to mark them as April Fools. And what did the children do? The children would make a paper fish and would put them on their back in order to highlight them as April Fools. When the person discovers the tag, the prankster would yell Poisson d'Avril. And when the person on whose back that paper fish was put, when that person discovered the tag, the other people or the prankster, the children who played prank on them would scream Poisson d'Avril, that means April fish. Some of the most successful pranks or practical jokes were by the media. So, media also played pranks on the people. For example, instance means example. A BBC television program ran a famous hoax in 1957. Hoax, something fake, a fake telecast was run on the television, in which the Italians were shown harvesting spaghetti from the trees. Now, spaghetti is the after result of something. You do not harvest spaghetti, neither does spaghetti grow on trees. So, some people, some Italians were seen cultivating spaghetti from the trees. After that telecast, a large number of people contacted the BBC wanting to know how to cultivate spaghetti. trees. So they wanted to know how to cultivate spaghetti on the trees. Not everyone is convinced that this is actually how the tradition of April Fool's Day began. Many people attribute different stories to the tradition. So the writer says that not everyone has accepted or is convinced with this, with the history of April Fools that I have just told. But every person has a different story attributed. Every person has a different story in connection to the April Fool's Day. And maybe it is just a day to celebrate the Joker in all of us. The writer says maybe this day is celebrated to remind each one of us that the Joker inside us should never die. So, the writer has told us about some facts on how and why the April Fool's Day began. Let us now look at the questions which are connected with it. So, you saw yourself, and I was reading this passage to you. I understood what the passage wished to tell me, and side by side, I underlined all the difficult words or the important points that I came across. Right? So, this is how you're supposed to do. Now, the first question. In the 1500s, who were the people who were given the name April Fools? As it is written in the very first paragraph. You see? The people who used to celebrate the new year on 1st of April. But we are not going to copy it as it is, as I told you already. So, those people who would celebrate New Year on 1st April were called the April Fools. So, those people who would celebrate the New Year on 1 April were called April Fools. In France, what did children do on 1st April? We have read, remember, Avril de Poisson or April Fish? So the children would put a paper fish on the back of those people who believed that it was easier to catch a fish using a bait. So those people who believed it was easy to catch a fish using a bait, those people were tagged with a paper fish. And this is what the kids would do. How did the BBC's spaghetti documentary affect people? So the spaghetti documentary, which was put on air by BBC, it affected the people. How? We have read that a large number of people started contacting BBC wanting to know how to cultivate spaghetti on trees. Okay. What is the author's purpose for writing this article? Why do you think the author has written this article? To let the readers know about the history of April Fool's Day. So he simply intended to tell the readers about something related to the history of April Fool's Day. Match the following. So you see, we have right now, there were two types of questions we've answered. The simple question answer type, and then there was a multiple choice question as well. Now is the third type of question wherein you have to match the words to their meanings. So what is the meaning of the word calendar? What is a calendar? It is a table for tracking, keeping track of the days. Tradition, what is tradition? A custom or a practice which is followed by people. Bait, as I told you, it is something which is used to tempt or trap an animal or people. And resist is to refuse to accept something. Now, the next typology of question, just see. You have to fill in the blanks. Completion of the sentences are also there. So, what do we mean by practical jokes? So, practical jokes means the jokes which are related to the day-to-day life or the daily routine of the people. Okay. Two changes that happened in 1500. What two things changed in 1500? One, the calendar changed, and the new year date changed. These two changes took place in 1500. April fish refers to people who were these people? Who believed that it was easy to catch fish using a bait. These were the people who were termed as April fish. The word prankster has dash connotations. Now, what do we mean by connotation? Connotation means meaning, reference. Do you think the word prankster has got anything negative related to it? No. We use the word prankster for those people who play a trick on somebody without harming the other person. You know, harmless people are known as pranksters. So it has got no negative connection to it. So it is a positive connotation. Now, the last sentence is successful pranks by media indicates jokes that were able to. What do we mean by the successful pranks by the media? Those jokes that were able to affect or influence the people at large. Okay, since we are talking about media, media always has a bigger impact on the people. So those jokes which affected a huge group of people were the successful pranks by media. So you see, dear students, I've taken up one question. I read it to you. We understood that question together, and then there were multiple types of questions on the basis of it that we answered. I'm sure there was no difficulty in answering it. Right. Why? Because we understood it well. Let us move on to the next question now. This question, this passage that we are reading is an extract from the Kabuliwala by Rabindranath Tagore. We all have read this beautiful story, the Kabuliwala by Rabindranath Tagore. So this is a small extract. So you see, the earlier passage that we solved was an informative passage. This one is an extract. This is a literary passage, right? So let us read that now. My 5-year-old daughter, Minnie, can't stop talking for a minute. After coming into the world, it only took her a year to learn to speak. And ever since, she has not wasted a minute of her waking hours by keeping silent. Her mother often scolds her and makes her shut up, but I can't do that. When Minnie is quiet, it is so unnatural that I cannot bear it. So her conversations with me proceed with great gusto. So this passage that we are reading, the narrator, the speaker of this passage is Minnie's father. We are going to read that further. So Minnie's father is telling us that his daughter, who was 5 years of age at that time when this portion of the story was written, she cannot stop talking for a minute. He says that after she was born, she took an year to learn speaking. And since then, she has not wasted her waking hours by keeping quiet. If she's awake, there is no way you can make her keep quiet. He also tells us that her mother often scolds Minnie. She tells her to shut up, to not to speak. But the father says that I cannot do that. When Minnie is quiet for the father, it is very unnatural. He does not like that feeling at all. It is very difficult for him to bear, to tolerate it. And therefore, the conversation that the father and Minnie have that always continues with great gusto. Gusto, a lot of energy and enthusiasm can be seen in their conversation. One morning, as I was starting the 17th chapter of my novel, Minnie came up to me and said, Father, Ramdayal, the gatekeeper, calls a cow a kawa instead of a cock. He does not know anything, does he? So one morning, the father tells us that when he was starting the 17th chapter of his novel, his daughter Minnie came to him and said that Ramdayal, who was their gatekeeper, he called a crow as a kawa rather than a cock. So Minnie made fun of Ramdayal with her father that he does not know anything. Before I had a chance to enlighten her about the multiplicity of languages in the world, she brought up another subject. So the father says that before I could apprise her, I could enlighten her, I could tell her about the multiple languages that exist in the world, she came up with a new topic of discussion. Guess what, father? Bhola says it rains when an elephant in the sky squirts water through its trunk. What nonsense he talks. On and on all day. So she told her father that Bhola would say that when an elephant, lifted its trunk and squirted water out of it, it threw out water from its trunk, that is when it rained. So she again made fun of Bhola and she said, how nonsense, what nonsense he says. And he says all this the all day long. Without waiting for my opinion on this matter either, she suddenly asked, Father, what relation is mother to you? So without waiting for an answer that the father could give over this elephant and the raining concept, she asked a question to her father that what is the relationship between you and mother? Good question, I said to myself, but to Minnie I said, now run off and play with Bhola, I've got work to do. So the father thought to himself that it was a good question, that what was the relationship between him and his wife, because to explain it to the child was something which was a little different and difficult. But rather than answering that question, the father said to Minnie, now run off and play with Bhola. I have a lot of work to do. But she then sat down near my feet beside my writing table and slapping her knees began to recite Agdumbaram at top speed. Meanwhile, in my 17th chapter, Pratap Singh was leaping under cover of night from his high prison window into the river below with Kanchanmala in his arms. So the father told Minnie to run off and play, but what did she do on the other hand? She sat on the ground near her father's feet and she started reciting a song. This Agdum Bangdam is a song. So she started reciting a song at a high volume. And meanwhile, at the same time, the father was on the 17th chapter and his hero, Pratap Singh, was leaping, was running under cover, hiding himself. He was running away from the prison with Kanchanmala in his arms. Now, this tells us something about Minnie's father, that he was a writer. He was writing a book and this was the character of his book. So my study looks out on the road. Minnie suddenly abandoned the Agdum Bagdum game, ran over to the window and shouted, Kabuliwala, Kabuliwala. So the father started looking onto the road and suddenly Minnie abandoned. She just left reciting that Agdum Bagdum game that she was reciting at a loud volume. She ran out, she ran over to the window and she shouted, Kabuliwala, Kabuliwala. So you see, this was a small extract which was taken from a big novel, Kabuliwala. And now we'll see the different kinds of questions that have been asked on the basis of it and how well we are able to answer them. Now, the first type of question is choose the right answer to complete the statements. So you are given with multiple answers and you have to choose the most appropriate of them all. She has not wasted a minute of her waking hours by keeping silent. This line suggests, what does this line suggest about Minnie? That she was an extremely talkative girl. Why could not the father tolerate Minnie being quiet? So, why was it so difficult for the father to see Minnie being quiet? A. Did he find it boring? No. Because it did not seem normal when Minnie was quiet. He himself has written that it was quite unnatural. When Minnie was quiet, it did not seem correct. When her father asked her to get out and play with Bhola, so when the father told Minnie to go and play with Bhola, what did Minnie do? Did she run out immediately? No. She went inside the house? No. She sat near the table and she began to sing. Whom does Minnie see outside the window? What did she shout? Kabuliwala. So you see, the first typology of questions on the basis of this passage was multiple choice. And now we are given with 3 questions which you will have to answer on the basis of your understanding of the passage. The first question, what do you think is the profession of Minnie's father? We've already discussed it. His story, he said, my character, Pratap. So he was a writer. Was Minnie's mother patient with her? Did she have the patience to listen to Minnie all day long? No, she was a little impatient because we have read that she would scold Minnie and would ask her to shut up. So this shows that she was not that patient with Minnie. Describe any 2 qualities of Minnie. Now, 2 qualities of Minnie that you can tell from this passage that we have read. She was talkative. She was very active or energetic, I can say. You see, the entire day, the father himself has told us that she does not waste even a single minute of her waking hour being quiet. Okay? So she was energetic, she was talkative, she was mischievous, and there are many more. So you see, dear students, this was the second passage, and it was with equal amount of ease that we were able to solve this passage also. Why? Because we understood it, and that was the reason why we were able to answer the questions. Let us look at one more passage for a better understanding. Now, this passage has a title, and the title of this passage is Forgiveness. Just the way Kabuliwala, the passage that we read prior to this, was taken up from the novel Kabuliwala, this passage that we are going to read is taken from the Bible. As you can see at the end of your screen, this passage is adapted from Bible. We all know that Bible is a religious book, so this is extracted from there. So let us start reading. So long ago, 2 brothers lived in a village. Their father was a rich farmer. They had many servants. The boys had everything they needed and much more. So there were 2 boys who lived in a village. Their father was very rich. He was a farmer. They had many servants and they had everything that they needed. Soon, the younger of the 2 brothers became bored with the country life. He wanted to do something different. He felt he was missing out on the real joys of life. So what happened? The younger brother, he felt that he was bored in the country in which he lived and he wanted to do something different. He thought that he was missing out on the real joy of life. So he said to his father, "Give me my share of the wealth. I want to live my own life." So this son, the youngest son, said to his father that give me my share of money, the wealth that you have, because I want to live my own life. This saddened his father immensely. Saddened, we all know this made the father sad immensely. He was very, very sad. He knew that he could not keep his son from leaving. So he knew that he could not control or stop his son from leaving. So he gave him his share of the wealth. Be careful and use what I have given you carefully and wisely, advised the father. So the father advised his son that whatever I have given to you, please remember that you have to use it in a very wise, in a very intelligent manner. The younger son moved to a far off land. The only thing he had in his mind was pleasure and enjoyment. All day long he would make merry. While he was doing this, he had many friends. They would be with him morning, noon, and night. He was sure that these people were his true friends and they would do anything for him. So the younger son took the money and moved to a far off land, to a land which was very far away from the place he was living. And the only thing that he had in his mind was to enjoy himself and to have fun. And all day long he did nothing but make merry. Making merry, he just had fun. He just enjoyed himself. While he was doing this, there were a lot of friends that he had. These friends would stay with him the whole day, morning, noon, evening. And the son, this youngest son, was sure that these people were his true friends and would always stay by his side. As the days went by, his funds started drying up. Drying up means his funds means the money that he had that began to get lesser and lesser. He soon became penniless. Penniless, he did not even have a penny left. And simultaneously, his friends disappeared too. Simultaneously, at the same time, his friends also started leaving him. And soon he found himself alone and helpless. A person from whom he had borrowed money gave him a job. His duty was to feed the animals on the farm and to clean the sheep's pen. He no longer dined on fine food. He lived in the servants' quarter. As he lay awake at night, he thought about his home and his family. Even his father's servants were better off than he was. So, there was a person from whom the son had borrowed money, and that person gave him a job. And what was the job that he had to do? He had to feed the animals on the farm and he had to clean the sheep's pen. Pen, the area, the fenced area within which the sheep lived. So he had to clean that area and he had to feed the animals. He was no longer able to feed himself or to give himself the fine food that he would eat earlier. He lived in the servants' quarter. And one night when he was lying awake, so he could not sleep, he was lying awake and he thought about his home and his family. And he realized that the way his father kept his servants was better than the way he was treated as a servant. He finally realized how foolish he had been. He said to himself, I will go back to my father and ask for forgiveness. I wonder if he will accept my apology. So he finally realized his mistake. He realized he was wrong. He decided that he will go back to his father and will ask his father to forgive him for his mistakes. He was wondering, he was thinking if his father would accept his sorry or not. His father would look out for his son every day. He longed for him to return and be a part of the family again. One day, when the old man spotted a bent figure trudging towards the farm, he ran towards him. He knew it was his son. Now, the father also was looking forward to meeting his son every day. He longed, he had this desire in him for, he was waiting for his son to return and to become a part of the family again. One day, the father spotted a bent figure. Spotted, saw. Bent, we all know somebody whose posture is a little bent because you're tired of working. So, this person who was bent was trudging towards the farm. Trudging, walking with a lot of difficulty towards the farm. The moment the father saw him, he knew that it was his son. Father, I have done something very wrong. I have hurt you. Will you please forgive me? Stammered the boy. His father embraced him. He called the servants to bring him water to wash and fresh clothes to wear. Then he invited friends and neighbors for a grand celebration. So the boy said to his father that, Father, I have done something very wrong. Will you please forgive me? The boy stammered. He spoke with a lot of difficulty. The father embraced him. The father hugged him and loved him and welcomed him. He called the servants to bring some fresh water and fresh clothes for him to change. And then he invited all his friends and neighbors for a very big celebration. When the elder son saw the merrymaking, the party, the feast that the father was giving, he asked what they were celebrating. When he learned that it was in honor of his younger brother's return, he was very upset. So when the elder son, when he got to know that it was because the younger brother had returned, he was very, very unhappy with that. He spoke angrily to his father. I have been with you all these years and worked hard. You have never given me such a lavish party. Yet, when this spendthrift son of yours returns, there is a great celebration. So the elder son was very unhappy. He said to his father in an angry manner that I have been living with you for so many years. I have worked so hard, but you have never given me such a lavish, such a grand party in my honor. And now, when this spendthrift son of yours, spendthrift, somebody who spends a lot, unthinkably, unnecessarily, we use the adjective spendthrift for that person. So the elder son said that your son, who is such a spendthrift, now that he has returned, you are giving a celebration in honor of him. My son, everything I have has always been yours, replied the father. Your brother did not lead a good life. Today he is sorry and returned. We are a family. Let us forgive and forget. So the father said to the elder son that whatever I have is yours. It has always been yours. Your brother, on the other hand, has not led a happy life. And now he is sorry for the errors that he's made and he has returned. And being a family, it is our duty to forgive and forget each other. So you see, dear students, this also is an extract that is taken from the Bible. Now let us look at the different kinds of questions that are asked from this passage. The first question says, answer the questions on the basis of your understanding of the passage. Why did the younger brother ask for his share of his father's wealth? So why did the younger brother want his share from his father's wealth? Because he found his country life to be boring and he wanted to enjoy his life. So he decided to go to a far off place and make merry. He just wanted to have a loving life. How did the son realize his mistake? The son realized his mistake when he had no money, he had no friends, he was alone, he was helpless, and the work that he did with the farmer, the treatment that he got there was even worse than the way his father treated his servants. So that is when he realized his mistake. What were the reactions of the father and the older son to the return of the younger brother? The father welcomed the son with open arms. He was very happy. He embraced his son. On the other hand, the older son was angry because he had never been given such a lavish party. Okay, now the second type of question that we have on the basis of the passage is find words in the story which mean the same as the following. So you have to find words which have the same meanings as given to you below. To speak hesitantly and repeat words or sounds. So what do we mean by speaking hesitantly? The word from the passage that we have read is ring. The second word, wasteful, or one who spends money wastefully, is known as a spendthrift, as I told you. At the same time, again, this is something I have told when I was reading the passage for you, simultaneous, something which takes place at the same time simultaneously. And walking slowly with a lot of difficulty is judging, again from the passage. So you see, my dear students, we did 3 different types of passages. We did all the possible types of questions that can be asked to you, and there was no difficulty altogether that we faced in answering them. Why? Because we were able to comprehend those passages. So this is what you need to keep in mind when attempting your section A. Read and understand the passage well. Underline whatever difficult words or phrases or expressions you come across, and then answer the questions in your own words. So my dear students, I hope that you have a very good idea of how to attempt section A, and scoring section, scoring in your comprehension passages is equally easy. Just read your passages well. So my dear students, I shall pause now and will see you all in the next video. Thank you.